Good morning. Is that okay at the back, by the way? Good. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation for me to be here this morning. Just to give you a little bit of background before I start. I've actually been in the IT industry for 27 years. I used to have more hair when I started. I gradually lost it. I've been with InterSystems now for 14 years, working mainly in healthcare, but also in other things. And for those of you who don't know InterSystems, we are a software company headquartered in Boston, in Massachusetts, in the United States. We've been in operation now for over 30 years. We're a privately owned company. And we've spent those 31 years dealing not just with healthcare, but on the healthcare front, through all the major players in the world, either directly or through our partners. And that gives us a rather unique worldwide view about what's going on and who's doing what and how they're doing it. So I'd like to spend the next 20 to 30 minutes just going through some of the examples of things that we're seeing, some of which I've worked on personally. And if you have any questions, if it's going to be a short question, you don't understand something as I'm going along, please raise your hand and I'll try and answer it. If it's going to be a more complicated answer, then hopefully we'll do it at the end when there are questions and answers. Or you're more than welcome to come and find me either on the booth or over lunch or anywhere else. Okay. Just to give you a reminder of what the World Health Organization has actually said and stipulated. They want everybody to join up their medical records so that the clinicians have a better view, so that the patients are more safe, and so that the managers and the policymakers can see what's going on. And everybody is interpreting that in a slightly different manner. As we go through this, I'll show you 3 examples of how this is being done. One of the problems we all face, healthcare technology is costing us more money year in, year out, every year. The problem with that is that we're sometimes a victim of our own successes. We're coming up with new technology that's enabling us to look after people better and to deal with things better, which means that people are living longer, so we need to take better care of them, more expensive medications, and the cost is going up all the time. That needs to be addressed. It's not something we're going to be able to get rid of. Governments are having to adjust to their populations. Not only are populations getting older, but in some cases they're getting poorer. The United States is having to spend $46 million to bring some of its poorer population into insured healthcare. China is spending $120 billion to take care of its population. It has a bigger population than the United States, but it's still a huge sum of money. Western Europe's healthcare systems are struggling. Okay? Not only are there more people living older, but they've also stopped working, so they're no longer contributing towards healthcare plans and pension plans. Demand is going up. We need to take better control of what we've got and use it better, and that's a common theme everywhere in the world. Three of the systems that we're working on in particular at the moment, one of them that I'm very closely involved with, I've spent the last 18 months working in Sweden. Sweden has the first live, worldwide, national patient overview. They are linking all their clinical systems in the entire country into one overview. And I'll tell you more about that as we go along. The federal state of Brasilia is linking all its hospitals and all its healthcare clinics together to take better care of its population. And they're issuing people with medical record cards. Chile is heading the same way as Brazil, slightly different situation, but they're also doing the same things. Each of these areas, although they're quite different countries, quite different cultures, have exactly the same ideas. They had to increase patient safety. They had to reduce the cost. Wasted lab tests. Legislation. Lawyers' bills. When you get it wrong with a patient and they sue you, it costs you money. Even if they don't sue you, trying to put them right again after you put them wrong costs you money. They have to optimize their resources. Nobody has enough doctors. Nobody has enough beds. So you have to make sure that you're making the best use possible of what you've got. And each one of these three places had problems with getting access to clinical information in remote areas. And you might say, well, you can understand that in Brazil. Brazil is a big place. And it has some very remote areas, and we'll talk about those as we go through. Chile also has some remote areas. Sweden? You ever been in the north of Sweden in the winter? 4 and 5 meters deep snow. Okay? Now you might think it's a well-developed Scandinavian country. It's still difficult to get around. They still have similar problems. One of the best ways of getting a patient in the north of Sweden into a hospital is to put him into an aircraft. Very similar project definitions. Each one of these three countries, very importantly, had a clear determination from its political leaders. This is the direction we're going in, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, and we will do it. And I'd have to say that in all the projects we've been involved in worldwide, if you do not have this determination from your political leaders, you will not succeed. No matter how hard you try, you fail, because you haven't got the politicians on board. And they're the people with the money. Okay. You must have the willing cooperation of the clinical leaders. They must be involved from the start. If you get them to buy into what it is that you're doing, they will drive it for you, they will champion it for you, and they will make sure it works. Big mistakes have been made throughout the world because the politicians didn't consult the doctors. Now, politicians can be hard to please, doctors are even harder to please. And when you start disturbing one of those groups, you're in trouble. I should also point out that you have to get the lawyers on board, but they're a group that we don't normally talk about. Politicians and doctors, they're fine. Each one of these places also went for an adopt and integrate approach. They already had working clinical systems. They might have been what's called out of date. In other words, they were more than 10 years old, but they worked. They did the job. So why spend money replacing them? Other people have gone for what's called rip and replace. We want to standardize in software. We want to get rid of what we've got and have something more modern. The risk is high, the cost is enormous. So in Brazil, Chile, and Sweden, they all went for, let's keep what we've got, but make it work with everything else. Also very important for these three areas, and particularly in Sweden, not trying to do too much at once. Scope out what it is you want to do and keep to that scope. There's a phrase in the IT industry called functionality creep, which means that you keep thinking, oh, that's a good idea, I'll have that as now, I'll have this. Don't. Put it onto your wish list. Call it phase 2. Whatever it is you want to do, keep it in the back of your mind, but don't do it in phase 1. Keep within scope. Let's have a look at Brazil, and in particular, the state of Brasilia. Now, in this particular installation, it has one central installation in the main hospital in Brasilia. Everywhere else is linked to this over the internet and using web browsers. Some of these smaller blue and brown areas, they're healthcare clinics, and they are in what we might describe as some of the less wealthy regions of Brasilia. They're primary healthcare clinics. They are sometimes the only healthcare that the Brazilian citizen gets to see. They have dial-up lines. Now, they are slowly being improved on things like broadband, but the Brazilian government took the idea, we will spend money where we have to. If this works with dial-up, it might be painful, it might be inconvenient at times for the doctors, but it works. We'll get to it sooner or later. And that way, they got most of the states online very quickly, and we were able to make it work with what is effectively the ISDN type system, where it connects as required and then disconnects. It keeps the costs down. Also, they had that infrastructure in place, so why not use it? To give you an idea of the size of these things, 17 hospitals, 134 healthcare clinics, laboratories, emergency units, 5,000 healthcare professionals, all using the same system, same patient record. In Brasilia, they issue you with a health card with your name, your number on it. It's all done over the web. You can walk into any healthcare clinic and they'll register you. You don't have to be a citizen of Brasilia. I'm registered. So you actually find that millions of people from the outside regions who aren't in Brasilia are coming into Brasilia to get healthcare because it's proving to work and it's popular. And the citizen also recognizes once he has a card, he belongs. He's recognized by the system. What did they get out of this? Far better improvement in patient safety. What used to happen was that the patient would go to see their doctor, they'd have a blood test taken, the blood test would be sent to the lab, but then the patient would have to go to the lab to get their results, printed on a piece of paper, then take it back to the doctor. And they never knew when the test would be ready, so any time within 14 days, and they'd have to keep going to this lab. This lab might be 100 kilometers away. Then they'd lose paper, then the whole system would start again because they needed to redo the test. The Brazilian government has committed that every village in Brasilia will have access to the internet. Even if it's one PC in an internet cafe, everybody will have access to the internet and a printer. So they can go, even in the smallest villages, to a PC, enter the name and password they've been given, and see their result and print it out. And they can do this online. If we were on the internet now, we could do it. Not only that, but the citizens can get to see all the results, and they can get to see them quickly. The savings are expected to hit $20 million this year, simply in reduction of duplication and the advances in patient safety. The other thing that came out of this centralized system with all the information available was that all of a sudden the business managers were able to see what was going on. Now, they were being told what was going on in a way because the doctors and the managers were telling them, but now the business managers and the politicians could see it on a screen in front of them. They had direct access to information. And one of the things they discovered was that the intensive care units in the public hospitals were not having great bed usage. The private hospitals were far better. So what was the difference? They didn't have enough clean linen, so they couldn't reuse the bed. So the Secretary of State for Health in Brasilia went to a hospital and said, "Why aren't you using your beds?" And the head clinician said, "Because I haven't got enough linen. There aren't enough bed sheets. How can I use the beds?" So they bought them 2 more washing machines. Now, all of this is common sense, and the doctor at that hospital will tell you that he'd been telling them that for years. But all of a sudden, they could see the information on the screen and they believed it. So they went to us and said, "Why didn't you tell us?" Well, we did. It's an old argument, but we're not going there. But the fact was that for a very simple and relatively small investment of 2 industrial washing machines, they doubled their bed usage, simply by having access to information. This is just a screen dump of what the user gets to see when they log on to see their blood test. And don't forget, anybody who's had a blood test in Brasilia can do this. Very simple, and actually very fast. It has to be because of the low bandwidth that's available in these areas. It has to be nice, clean, simple. They log on, it shows them their results. Nothing fancy about it. It's in Korea text, no pictures really. They download it, they print it, or they let the doctor log on and see it. No problems. Chile, Santiago, very similar operation. Centralized hospital again. They have slightly better infrastructure in terms of telecommunications. So a lot of it is over what we might describe as broadband, anything from 1 megabit upwards. But there's a lot more facilities, everything coming together in one. Now the idea for Chile is at the moment this is just part of Santiago. Eventually it will be all of Santiago. Then it will expand out into the countryside in general. But similar problems again in that there are what we might call deprived areas. There are areas where telecommunications isn't as best. It has to be small, it has to be simple, and it has to be easy to put in. Now, at this point I would normally ask if there are any doctors in the room, but I'm not going to ask that here. One of the things you find in medical systems is that you can design a workflow, you can design screens, and you can make them look. And the clinicians will tell you how it is it's supposed to work. And then the next doctor will come along and say, that's wrong. I want it this way. So you have to be able to implement a system that recognizes the user as they log in and gives them the screens that they want to see. Not only that, but they might want to have a different view of the screens dependent upon where they are. So that kind of system is already built into Brazil and to Chile, so that no matter who you are, where you are, you get the workflow and the screen designs that you want. That way, you can't argue that some other doctor did it wrong. If it's wrong, it's your fault. Okay? And we also have to make it simple enough so that we don't have to keep going back and change the system. The user administrators must be able to change the system, reducing the cost again, because flying me to Brazil is expensive. And they don't want to pay for that, it's a waste of money. As much as I like Brazil. Sweden. Much smaller population, 9 million people. Actually, it's a growing population, and they have a lot of refugees from the Middle East. A lot of Iranians and Iraqis in various areas. So the birth rate is going up in Sweden for the first time in 10 or 15 years. It's split into 21 healthcare regions called counties. Each region is independent. Therein lies the first problem. Because in order to get a national system, you have to get all 21 counties to agree. So you're dealing with politicians again. Now the national government can ask them to agree, but they can't tell them to agree. But fortunately, you have to understand the Swedish culture, and I didn't when I first got there. They are very pragmatic people, very realistic. And if they see it's good, they'll do it. They're also very pedantic people. If there is one bug in the system, then the system doesn't work. It must be bug-free. A lot of people say, oh, it doesn't matter that that's slightly wrong. No. It has to be perfect. Okay? If you've ever had anything from Sweden, you might, for those of you who've ever seen IKEA furniture or Volvo cars, that's where it comes from. There is an absolute integrity in terms of system and way of life. Also, it's a very bureaucratic country. A lot of state tax, a lot of investment into infrastructure and into healthcare and into education. So there is a national electronic health record connecting all the systems. At the moment, it's just finished its pilot, but it was signed off in March 2008, sorry, that's wrong. I went live May 2009. It took us 13 months to get the system up and running. Start to finish, screen designs, message designs, the whole works. And we're dealing with embedded systems. We didn't change them. All those clinical systems already in use in Sweden are still there. We haven't replaced any of them. They had to make certain changes so that we could talk to them, but they were relatively small. Again, keeping down the risk. Every time you change software, it's a risk. You can ask a programmer to make a one-line change and your entire system crashes. So reduce that. I told you they were pragmatic. They discovered that Swedish law would actually stop the system from being usable. They changed the law. The problem was that if you were a clinician looking after a patient and that patient had been seen in a different county, by law you weren't supposed to see that information, so they changed it. We also had to integrate the various existing national systems. Now, Sweden is a very organized country. To give you an idea, if they say a meeting starts at 10:30, they say the meeting starts at 10:30. Don't walk through the door at 10:30, walk through the door at 10:25 because the meeting starts at 10:30. Everybody has a national ID card, national ID number, issued at birth. That number does everything. It's your healthcare record, it's your tax record, it's your driving license record, everything. If there's a number involved, that's it. So when you're selecting people in the system, you don't select by name, address, or anything else. It's by number. It's unique. If I fall sick in Sweden, they allocate me a number, and I'm only allocated one. If I fall sick twice, it's the same number. And they have a national system that checks it. They have a national system that identifies every clinician in the country as to what they are, where they are, what they're doing. And when somebody logs on, we have to go and talk to that national system to see who they are. Interesting things that they said were, you know, when a doctor is looking at clinical information for a patient he's never seen before, he doesn't actually want to see it in detail. He just wants a summary overview. The most recent medications, the most recent lab tests, the most recent discharge letters. We don't want everything in detail. We might, but 80% of the time, we just want the overview. And you know what? We don't want to scroll up and down. We want it all on one page. Because scrolling up and down means you miss things. And you might forget to scroll up and down. So it's got to be there on one page. So that was what we did. Very pedantic people. What we're talking about, pragmatism. The citizen portal will come in for Sweden, but not yet, because it wasn't in the scope of phase 1. They will make that work later. Hence the reason we managed to get all this done in 13 months. Very strict, disciplined approach to how they wanted to do things. It doesn't work everywhere, by the way. But they're probably unique. Any other Western European country would be far less organized than this one. The Swedes are quite unique in this particular case. What are we doing in India? Well, we're a worldwide company. We have a presence here, we've got an office, and my colleagues are here in the Indian office. And these are some of the hospitals that we're working with in India itself. I'm sure you'll recognize some of them. Now, at the moment, it's not as mature as other marketplaces that we're working in, but it's growing and it will mature. And we're already getting questions about what it is that we're doing in other places and can we bring that here into India. So in summary, and to wrap up, when you're looking at these kinds of systems, when you're looking at what you've got and how can you make it better, and how can you improve people's lives, there are a number of things to look at. Making sure that business intelligence can be provided by the system, so that you yourself, as an administrator and manager, know what's going on in your system and you can see what people are doing. But even more importantly, so that your political leaders can see what's happening in the system and you can prove to them what you've been telling them for years. When you do that, you'll be able to make far better use of your own resources, your own doctors, your beds, your budget. You'll be able to target it far better. And this is certainly the case that we've already seen in places like Brazil and Chile. Might sound silly, but you get happier staff if they can see that you're doing things better. If they can see that you're improving their lives, they're happier and they work better. And again, one of the things that we get out of these places in Sweden and the others is that we're getting clinicians coming up to us and saying, that's great. Make sure that politicians are driving the idea. We have to make sure the clinicians are behind the idea. Otherwise, what was the point? You'll never succeed. I could point out a major Western country who maybe made those mistakes, but I'm not going to say a word. Be pragmatic, be realistic, and it will work. And if you start slowly and you start simply and you have a success, you can build on it. Go too big, make a failure, nobody's going to back you again. Okay? Now, a lot of what I've said today you've probably heard before, and a lot of it can be termed to be common sense. But you know, if people don't actually get up every so often and say, remember the common sense attitude, you forget. So thank you very much for listening. I hope it's been interesting for you, and if you have any questions, please ask or please come and see me later. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ian. And would you like to take questions right now, or I make the floor open for some couple of questions, but maybe 2 or 3.
This nation, Sweden, you talked about patient record.
Yes.
Who owns the patient record? Because you talked about clinicians can access from anywhere. Is it ownership is that of the patient? Because anywhere if you can go, is that because you're using the word legal also, law. What's the position?
The legal position changes not just by country, but also within a country. Sweden is one of the simplest we've found, in that the doctor clicks a box to say, I have permission to see this patient's record. If the doctor did not have the right to click that box, then the lawyers will see him or her later. But all they have to do is click the box. And that is logged, it's audited, and reports go off to various bodies where it is interrogated later to make sure they said the right thing. So in fact, although generally it is the primary clinician who is looking at a patient's record, there is nothing to stop any clinician who is authorized to see the system from seeing any patient. The only changes they made was that an individual patient can block a range of dates to say, I don't want information to be seen for those dates. But they cannot stop any clinician in the country from seeing the rest of it. Now that's completely different from other countries. And if you look at Switzerland, not only does Switzerland not have one consent, every canton in Switzerland has its own idea of how to do things. It gets very complicated.
Because, you know, in India they are introducing the universal ID. So people already has been so much of a talk about privacy, confidentiality, what you can get access, what you can do. I think this seems a big Pandora box on this issue.
You're quite right that the idea of consent to view can be a large problem when it comes to the ability to see a shared medical record. It's mostly, we have found, a case of education for the patients themselves. Normally, when they are informed and educated as to why it's a good thing that doctors can see their information, then nobody has a problem. And at the end of the day, if you're sick, you want the doctor to know what's wrong with you. There is, and we see, against Western Europe, has a far higher degree of paranoia than most places. And I'd have to say the UK is top of that list. But that really has been almost a lack of education for the patient. There will always be some people who decide to opt out of the system. And every system we know has that capability in there. So that the patient can say, in Sweden, I don't want myself on the national record at all, but if I am there, everybody can see it. So it changes by country, but always it comes down to the education of the population. And if it's put to them properly, they will buy into it. Good on. Did that answer your question? Yes.
I'm Priyank here. I have a question on the cost of implementing and maintaining such large systems. As you know, in India, the hospitals probably allocate less than 1% of their annual budget on IT. Mm-hmm. If they have to invest on such large enterprise-wide systems, what kind of investment or the cost is incurred?
I'm not going to be able to give you a price for a national type integration system as in Sweden, because there are various contractual obligations around that. I think it would be accurate, though, to say that at the moment the Indian healthcare system is probably not at a state of maturity where you want to look at what Sweden is doing and implement it here. That will come later. You could do things on a regional level, as they're doing in Chile and Brazil, and what they've seen is a reduction in their maintenance and a reduction in their training bill and everything else because they have one centralized system which is available from everywhere. So in reducing the number of systems that they had, or buying one system that does more, that way they've reduced the cost. There is obviously upfront cost, and that's something you'd have to speak to my sales colleagues about. As an engineer, I am prohibited from discussing cost. I can tell you how it works, but I can give you an idea of how much it costs, but then the salesman would argue. So, by all means, talk to my sales colleagues about the general uptime cost, and that's normally worked out by size of hospital, how many beds, and so on. I would have to say that a national electronic health record probably starts for a system somewhere over $5 million US. So probably not yet ready for India. And there are only certain mature markets that would want to do that. But again, it gives that cost savings. Did I answer your question, you think?
Yeah, I was just looking at maybe from a percentage point, what do you see a hospital, not a specific number per se?
Normally, if you look at total cost of ownership over 5 years, it generally comes down. And it's based normally around things like training and maintenance, because those drop significantly. And one of the things we've also found is that in order to reduce costs, what we always do is we implement a system called train the trainer. So we'll identify a number of people in that region, and we'll train them and use the system. They then go out and train other people, and so on and so forth. So you have this kind of curve effect. And again, it's cheaper because you're using local resources. Yes, sir?
This is Krishna Rao from Karishma. In terms of architecture, I just wanted to know whether at the regional hospital also you have a systems and the servers, or they are also connected to the central server only.
We'll say that again through the microphone. And yeah?
Just wanted to know in terms of architecture, whether at the regional hospitals, do you have a servers, or they are also connected to the central server through some more needs of connectivity?
If you're looking at the Brazilian and Chilean models, then they are browser-based, so there is no real software on the PC itself. Although there are various things for connecting to medical instrumentation that would be on the local PC. Everything is then done by secure HTTP traffic back to the central server, just like it's a web server. So that way, again, we keep it lightweight, we keep it nice and lean and fast. And also it means that when you have thousands of installations, the maintenance cost of maintaining software on all those PCs is a nightmare. So we put all the software back to one central location. If you're looking at the Swedish model, then they already have their own existing care systems. So those are sending message types backwards and forwards, but that's a completely different way of doing things. So in answer to your question, no, there is no real software installed on the regional hospitals or the care systems. All the software is back in the central location.
But what if there is no connectivity? If there are connectivity issues?
Despite what you might regard as a slow and old-fashioned infrastructure in some of these places, to everybody's surprise, they have very few connectivity problems. Dial-up is reasonably accurate. Nobody really likes it, but it works. And there are normally enough connections across the infrastructure so that if one line fails, you can bypass and go to another route. To give you an idea, in Brazil, if you're in a care system in Goma, in one of the cities, you might normally connect to your own regional hospital from a healthcare centre and route through there to the central system. If that goes down, you can actually dial straight into the central system, or you can dial into somebody else's hospital and go through there. So there's a wide variety of ways into the system. If one link fails, try another one. And there are various procedures in place for option 1, option 2, option 3. And the relatively untrained people at these healthcare centres know exactly what to do. Like, that's failed, press this button. Keep going. So yes, that was a factor. When somebody said to us, this is the kind of connectivity we have in these places, I said, oh, really? But there are always ways around this, and if you think imaginatively, and you make use of what you've got, you can make it work. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you.
You recommended, if I understood it correctly, you recommended that while implementing IT projects, one should have an incremental and gradual approach.
Yes.
And whereas the conventional thinking goes that as far as IT-oriented projects are concerned, there should be basic process re-engineering in the workflow. That there should be a radical transformation in the process if you want to bring in efficiency in the process. So if you could reconcile or clarify these two apparent contradictions.
Okay, let's take the case of an existing hospital, and it has, let's say, 20 existing applications. You want to replace those 20 applications with one centralized system. But you don't have to do all at once. What you can do is you can say, okay, we're going to replace the patient administration system and we're going to put it into the new one. So we're going to pull all the records over. But the labs and all the other kinds of systems will continue to exist, but what we'll do is we'll integrate them to make them talk. In 3 months' time, we'll replace the lab systems. 3 months after that, we're going to replace the next system. You know, at the end of the year, maternity will come into the next system. So it's what we call a salami approach. You just slowly slice it up. Keep making use of something that works, and then you can also reduce your costs because you're not trying to train all the people in the hospital all at the same time to do all of this. They can see what's happening with their colleagues in other departments. They know what the timetable is, and certainly if you keep to the timetable, they know what's going to happen. They can be prepared for it. So, whilst you're right in that you've actually taken a radical move to install this new, all-embracing healthcare system in the hospital, you don't have to stop everything and start again. You just slowly do it. And it gives your staff more confidence as well that you know what you're doing. You go. Anything else?
Under this bilateral scheme, this government of India and government of Sweden, we have recently signed an MOU to create a similar EHR system in our country.
Oh, great.
That's in 2008 only. And we have signed another issue to sign another MOU beyond control on cervical cancer.
Okay.
Under a collaboration with the Uppsala University of Sweden. It's going to happen after 3-4 months.
Give me a call. I have to say that it's my second time in India, and I always like coming here. And after 18 months of Sweden, where 9 months of the year is dark and cold, coming to India to help you would be a relief. But don't tell the Swedes. Anybody else?
I think we'll have to restrict this
Okay.
to this point, because we already
We're
had
fine.
a session.
Well, thank you for your attention, thank you for your questions, and good luck with what you're doing. But please come and see me if you have any further questions. Thank you.